In the annals of modern conflict, certain engagements are defined not by their scale, but by their disproportionate impact on the trajectory of a campaign. The city of Sumy, during the initial phase of the large-scale military operation in Ukraine, represents one such critical juncture. It was not a theater of the same notoriety as Kyiv, nor did it endure the protracted siege that befell Mariupol. It lacked the high-intensity, street-by-street contests for control seen in Kharkiv. Yet the events that transpired in and around Sumy from late February 2022 were of immense strategic consequence. Had this city on the northeastern frontier been decisively overrun in the opening days, the entire offensive axis aimed at the Ukrainian capital could have advanced with far greater speed, depth, and lethality. Sumy became a front defined by a tenacious, asymmetric resistance that succeeded in bleeding an entire military column, disrupting its momentum at the very border. At the dawn of February 24, 2022, Russian forces initiated a multi-pronged offensive across Ukraine's northern and northeastern borders. One of the most vital axes of advance originated from the Belgorod and Kursk oblasts. The direct vector pointed through Sumy and onward toward Kyiv. The operational design for this thrust was predicated on speed. The objective was not to methodically occupy every town and city, but to bypass smaller urban centers, execute a rapid mechanized advance toward the capital, and contribute to its encirclement from multiple directions. Within this initial strategic calculus, Sumy was not designated as a primary target for long-term occupation. Instead, it was viewed as a logistical waypoint, a necessary transit point to be swiftly overcome before the main body of the force proceeded toward its ultimate objective. This assumption, however, would prove to be a grave miscalculation. The strategic value of Sumy was rooted in its geography and infrastructure. The city is a crucial node, sitting astride key road networks that provide the most direct and efficient supply route from Russian territory into the depths of northern Ukraine. Complete and secure control over Sumy would have conferred a significant advantage to the advancing forces. It would have guaranteed the logistical integrity of their northern flank, allowing for a steady and protected flow of fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. This, in turn, would have alleviated the immense pressure on other supply lines, particularly those attempting to bypass the heavily contested city of Kyiv. With a secure rear in Sumy, the push to encircle Kyiv could have been accelerated, concentrating greater combat power on the capital. Conversely, a failure to neutralize Sumy meant that the entire Russian army advancing southward would be compelled to operate with an exposed and vulnerable flank, its long logistical tail subjected to constant and debilitating harassment. The city could not be ignored without severe consequences. In the initial 48 to 72 hours of the operation, Russian mechanized units penetrated the outskirts of Sumy. Armored columns advanced into the city's periphery, and scattered, chaotic firefights erupted within its urban confines. Several districts were temporarily occupied as forward elements pressed through. However, a critical failure occurred at this stage. The advancing force did not achieve any of its secondary objectives necessary for securing the city. It failed to dislodge or neutralize the local government apparatus. It did not succeed in breaking the command and control of the Ukrainian defense network established in the area. Crucially, it did not inflict a crippling blow on the Ukrainian military units stationed within the city. Consequently, Sumy was not captured in any meaningful military sense. Instead, it was effectively bypassed, left behind as a contested but unconquered pocket while the main Russian columns continued their race toward Kyiv. This decision to proceed without consolidating control over a key logistical hub would become a defining strategic error of the northeastern campaign. What followed was a textbook case of asymmetrical warfare, where the defender leveraged knowledge of the terrain and the aggressor's vulnerabilities to maximum effect. As Russian convoys, stretching for tens of kilometers, snaked their way south from the border, their very length became their greatest weakness. The logistical chain, the lifeblood of any mechanized army, was overextended and exposed. The route through the Sumy Oblast was transformed from a supply corridor into a gauntlet of attrition. Operating from the city, Ukrainian forces, including regular army units, territorial defense, and partisan groups, began a systematic campaign of interdiction. They executed lightning-fast ambushes on vulnerable supply convoys, striking with anti-tank guided missiles, drones, and small arms before melting back into the urban or rural landscape. They deliberately avoided prolonged direct engagements with superior armored formations, opting instead for hit-and-run tactics that maximize damage while minimizing their own casualties. Sumy therefore assumed a paradoxical status. It was a city that was never fully taken, yet it remained perpetually present behind enemy lines, a persistent and draining threat that gnawed at the rear of the advancing army. Simultaneously, the civilian population of Sumy was subjected to immense pressure. The city endured sporadic but damaging artillery shelling and limited air raids, instruments of coercion designed to break morale and compel capitulation. The psychological strain was continuous. Despite this, the systemic collapse that the pressure was intended to induce never materialized. The local civilian authorities remained functional, continuing to operate and coordinate essential services under dire circumstances. The populace itself became an active component of the defense, providing critical logistical support to the military units and, crucially, feeding a constant stream of intelligence on Russian troop movements. There was no mass surrender. No collaborationist, pro-Russian administration was successfully established. Sumy held firm, a pocket of resistance that remained defiant, albeit relatively isolated from the main Ukrainian lines. By early March 2022, the consequences of this tenacious defense were becoming undeniable. The Russian offensive on the northeastern axis was visibly faltering, hamstrung by severe logistical shortfalls. Convoys were stalled, vehicles were abandoned for lack of fuel, and frontline units were running low on ammunition. The rapid encirclement and fall of Kyiv, the central objective of the entire northern campaign, had not been achieved. The pressure from the Sumy pocket became so significant that Russian commanders were forced to divert combat units from their primary axis of advance, tasking them with turning back to protect their vulnerable rear and attempt to suppress the Ukrainian resistance. By this point, Sumy had fulfilled its strategic role. Though it was not captured and never fully surrounded, its defenders had successfully slowed, weakened, and disrupted a far larger and more powerful military force. A military assessment of the Sumy campaign reveals a crucial lesson in modern defensive warfare. On a map, there was no single, resounding victory, marked by the capture of territory or the annihilation of a large enemy formation. However, in the broader context of the campaign, the outcome was a decisive success for the defenders. The Russian military failed to achieve its desired operational tempo. Its logistical framework was compromised to a critical degree, leading to a cascading failure that rippled all the way to the front lines. As a direct result, the pressure that could be brought to bear on Kyiv from the northeast was significantly diminished. The defense of Sumy demonstrated that in a conflict against a superior force, it is not always necessary to match firepower or win conventional set-piece battles. It is enough to prevent the enemy from advancing safely, to deny them secure lines of communication, and to turn their own logistical needs into a weapon against them. This is the art of attrition, the core of modern asymmetrical defense. In the grand narrative of the war, Sumy may lack the iconic battles or the visceral imagery of destroyed tank columns in a central square that defined other fronts. Its story is one of quiet, grinding resistance rather than spectacular clashes. But its contribution was indispensable. Without the stand made at Sumy, the Russian northeastern flank might well have reached the outskirts of Kyiv days or even weeks sooner. Fundamentally altering the calculus of the battle for the capital, the pressure on the city's defenders would have been exponentially greater, potentially leading to a vastly different outcome in that crucial early phase. In warfare, there are fronts that are won not by occupation or conquest, but by the simple, brutal act of preventing the enemy from passing through unmolested. Sumy was one of those fronts, a city that did not fall, and in not falling, helped to stall an army.